Hi everybody. So our lesson for today will be about square roots, and our goal will be to find and estimate square roots. Now, a few terms that you need to remember. Square root. So what does it mean when we have a square root? So a number A is a square root of another number, which is B, if we know that A squared is equal to B. So square root is whatever number that you multiply to itself, that will give you the other number. Okay? Now when you are working with square root, you will always see what we call as the radical symbol. And this is that symbol. It indicates a non-negative square root. Okay? Now just to be specific here, if we talk about square root, let's say a number that you can multiply to itself that will give you another number. Let's take the case of 9, okay? So if you have 3 squared, the answer there is 9. If you also have negative 3 multiplied to itself, the answer also will be 9. But once you apply the radical symbol to 9, the square root of 9, the answer that we are looking for is the non-negative, which means our answer here will be positive 3. Okay? So the square root of 9 will be 3. Next, we have the radicand. The radicand is actually that expression inside the radical symbol. All right, so let's have this next problem here. Let's simplify the square root expressions. So let's say we have the square root of 81. So can you think of a number that if you multiply to itself will give you 81? So imagine, so this number multiplied by itself, the answer will be 81. So thinking about that with your multiplication table, you know that this number will be 9 times 9, the answer will be 29. Therefore, the square root of 81 is going to be equal to 9. All right, moving on to the next one. We have the square root of 9 over 16. So try to think, okay, what number, in this case it's a fraction, what fraction, if you multiply to itself, will give you 9 over 16? Now, because it's a fraction, try to think what numerator, remember in multiplication of fractions, numerator times numerator will be the product here. Okay, so what number, if you multiply to itself, will give you 9? So that will be 3 and 3. Now, can we think of a number that if you multiply to itself will give you 16? In that case, that would be 4. So 4 times 4, that will be 16. So from here, we know that the square root of 9 over 16 is going to be 3 over 4. All right? So these numbers here in this example are actually what we call as perfect squares. So perfect squares are the answer when you multiply a certain number to itself. So for example, 49 is a perfect square. Why? Because 7 squared, 7 times 7, is equal to 49. Now, when a radicand, the number inside the radical symbol, is not a perfect square, then you can estimate the square root of the radicand. So here, I took the liberty of getting or giving you all the perfect squares from the numbers 1 up to 12. And you can continue doing this. I would suggest that you put the perfect square values of the numbers 13 up to 20 behind on the back of your guided notes. This is going to be very helpful for you. Okay? So let's do some estimation practice here. So between which two whole numbers are the following values found? And we are not to use our calculator. What we need to use is our knowledge about the perfect squares. So in the case of the square root of 17, what will be our good estimate? Okay, so if you're going to see the number inside the radicand is 17. Now, which perfect squares, where can you find 17? Between what perfect squares will they be? So if you're going to look at those perfect squares, 17 is between 16 and the next perfect square, which is 25. So we know that the square root of 17 is going to be somewhere as 4 point whatever decimal value it will be. Okay? Now 17 is nearer to 16 than to 25, so our estimate will be possibly 4.1 or 4.2, something like that. Okay? That will be our estimate for the square root of 17. Okay? Now let's try another example. Let's use a different ink here. How about the square root of 125? Okay, now going back to our, let's just put it back over here. 125 is between which perfect squares? Now you see here we have 121 and 144. So the square root of 125 is going to be, so square root of 125 is going to be between 11, which is 121, and between 12, which is 144. 125 is much closer to 121, so our estimate here would be probably 11.2-ish, or 11.1 would be another good choice. Okay, so that's how you can estimate your square roots. So this next example is just like what we did earlier, but this time it is in word problem form. So if you read this problem, you will see that the measurement we are concerned with is 386 square microns. What's the approximate side length of the square in the nearest microns? So 386, we need to find an approximate value for the square root of 386. So now you think, how much or what perfect squares are very near to 386? The higher value that you can think of will be 400. Why 400? Because 400 is 20 squared. The lower value, then you know it's going to be 19 squared. If you find the value of 19 squared, that is going to be 361. So if you're going to analyze 386, where is it closer to 361 or to 400? Well, assuming that this is 360, 380 something is somewhere in between. So we can say that a good estimate for the square root of 386 would be 19.5 or probably 19.6. That's our estimate for the square root of 386.